Welcome, trackers, to Plaster Casting 101. I'm going to cast these two raccoon tracks together so that there'll be one plaster cast. And once again, in framing the track, you want to make sure not to move your hands over the track. And when you push in to the sand, do it carefully. And it's also good in this case to buffer the sand or brace the sand on the outside. Just get it right in next to there. And there, it's ready to cast. Now the thing to remember with plaster of Paris is that it's 2 parts plaster to 1 part water. And the tricky part. And I'm just going to pour it in. And I'm not stirring it at this point. This is what it looks like after there's been half the amount of plaster that we need. And remember that I have not stirred it yet. Now, as I pour this plaster in, watch the reaction of the plaster to the water. And what we should get to is less and less of it will dissolve into the water the more I add. And we begin to get a mountain, or what I like to call an island in the middle of the lake. But we can see that the island is there just below the surface. What this is telling us is that we're getting close to the right amount. So now our island is a little bit bigger, it's taking longer to dissolve, and some of it is sticking up above the surface of the water. We still have some to go. So now our mountain is going to persist above the surface of the lake, and yet it's going to draw water up into it. What you're looking for is an island in the lake that sticks up above the surface, and the size of that island is about half the surface area of your lake. Okay, the plaster is ready to be stirred. It's nice to have a stiff stirring stick that has a flat edge. Not essential, but works well. And you can see that the plaster stirs up quite easily. And your consistency is like a runny milkshake or a somewhat runny pancake batter without the lumps. And that's the beauty of doing it this technique, adding plaster to the water. You get very few lumps. Now we're ready to pour. Okay, I'm going to pour the plaster into the track, and I'm going to work with my hands going around the track. And I'm going to pinch my container into a spout, and I'm going to start at the back of the cast so that the plaster flows out across the landscape from back to front. This has the advantage of filling the track, and especially the claw marks, in a manner that helps to not trap any air bubbles in those fine details like claw marks. Once the track is completely covered, then you can move your plaster about. Now the sand here is nice and firm, so I'm not worried about disturbing it as I pour. If you were to be worried about that, you could always pour it onto a surface such as this and let it come down onto the track more gently. The final thing about pouring is to get all that plaster out of there. It's been about 45 minutes since we poured the plaster, and usually that's plenty of time for the plaster to have cured, but we always test it to make sure by tapping. So listen for that sound, and that's what you want to hear. We can take the plastic wrappers off here real easily. Just scoop alongside the track, pop underneath, and there you have it. Okay, we're going to wash this sand off just by running it back and forth in the water. This is nice loose sand, so it comes off pretty easily. You can also use a garden hose with some pressure behind it. That'll do a nice job, especially if you have silt or mud that doesn't come off very easily. And you can also take a toothbrush, and if you rub the track carefully, and then create a little bit of a current, you'll get a little bit more of that sand. So we have a pretty nice track. We do have some air bubbles. Plaster didn't quite fill in that claw mark completely, that's why it's bright white. Those claw marks though came out very well. And in this texture of sand, that's a pretty darn nice